So I have a new problem on my hands where a lot of my friends who have figured out I'm a woodworker keep dropping broken furniture off at my house. So a really good friend of ours just dropped off this rocking chair which has a lot of war wounds, and I'm excited to restore it. And so I'm just going to share the process with you of kind of going through and diagnosing different problems that I'm seeing, figure out, how did someone originally put this thing together so that I can take it apart, and then just share, kind of how I figured out how to fix the thing and get it back in working order. So as I'm kind of figuring it out, it looks like this crest rail sort of holds a lot of things together. So I'm going to start by removing it and seeing what happens. Okay. So just kind of continuing to assess the damage, and you can see it's coming apart right there. Now this is just, that's what you call 30 years of butt fuzz right there. Oh yeah. I figured out that the undercarriage, this part under here, is pretty much intact. All the damage is kind of up here. So what I've determined, you can see there's kind of these two separate sides. So obviously this is the main thing I need to fix. And I figured out if I can get each one of these sides off of their leg, then I can kind of bring these two pieces together and kind of fix the problem. So there's this pin you can see now that's going through the tenon here. So I've just chiseled enough away around the pin to where I can get some vice grips on it. So you can see it's kind of just like a little headless nail in the center that I had to get out. So I've got the bottom of the rocker kind of clamped to my bench, so I'm just gonna sort of start to hit this, see if it's, I'm looking right here to see if anything's gonna be moving. All right, so it looks like it's coming loose. Whew. There we go. Hasn't been apart in probably 50 years. Now that I have these two sides removed from the base of the chair, I have two main challenges, unless I find another. So the main challenge obviously is to get these two sides glued back together. And then the other challenge I have is that this used to be attached, these two elements were attached with a screw, but you can see it broke off. So kind of in here, I'm gonna have to remove that screw and then figure out how to kind of get this reattached. I think the easiest thing is gonna be actually to remove the arm. Hopefully this comes off relatively easily. All right, so that is, you can see the end of the screw here. So this is what I'm gonna try and remove. So I'm just gonna put it in the vise, try and clear up a little bit of wood around it. I think I have enough wood taken out where I can get in here with the vice grips. So that little broken screw has been stuck in there for decades. Now that I got this removed and that old screw that was broken off removed, I'm going to glue this back on and then put a new screw in here. But before I do, one thing I love about restoration is you just get to look at how stuff is made, you get to see old joints, and it's just so interesting to me that the bottom of this arm is just left with the bandsaw marks on it. No sanding or curving or anything, just straight up bandsaw marks. So I think that's interesting to see what people prioritize. So I'm just gonna start by putting some glue in these mortises. I'm gonna put a pretty healthy amount since these are very old joints. And I'm using hide glue. It's a traditional glue for chair making. The bond is reversible with some heat and water. Okay, looking better already. So for this piece, it's so loose that I think I'm actually just gonna pop it off so that I can really get to it. It was mostly broken down here already. So now what I can do is actually kind of properly get to this surface and kind of put some glue along here. Okay, just kind of carefully putting it back together. So this is the backrest, and so this will luckily be a pretty simple fix. All I'm really gonna do here is just use a crappy chisel and just kind of try and get off this old glue here. Now that I've got this arm reattached here, my next major set of challenges are obviously going to be to get these two sides back together. What I'm gonna do here is just kind of plane this part smooth. You can see there's a seam here. I wanna put some extra bracing here, and then I'll plane this one down smooth because I'm also gonna put a board on the bottom that kind of spans between the two sides to keep them together. Now I'm gonna take off kind of the initial layer of just old glue and grime from the edge of the broken seat, so we can kind of get an actual gluable edge here. Sometimes when you're working with an odd piece like this, you gotta get kind of creative. So I'm finding that I need to put a brace right here so that when I push really hard as I'm planing, this piece isn't going to push down because this isn't that much clamping surface. Now these edges are jointed, and you can see that they'll come together nicely now for a glue up. What I want to do to make this glue up a little easier and stronger is I'm going to cut a couple strips of kind of a backing piece of wood that I'm going to glue and screw to the bottom, and then that's also going to make it much easier to kind of seat the other side here. So it'll give me kind of a little platform that I can clamp downward against to keep both of the sides kind of in line, and then also some alignment so I can kind of clamp and put some pressure in this direction. I'll let this dry overnight, so I'm going to get the clamps off and show you what it looks like from underneath. So you can see the kind of bracing. This seat was made up from, I guess, about 5 pieces of wood. So each one of these braces is where there was kind of a seam between 2 pieces of wood that was glued together. And some of them were starting to fail. Obviously, this was the big failure where it was completely apart. But these ones were starting to crack, so just out of safety, kind of put a few there. As with a lot of this project, a lot of the challenge of working on this chair is that it's kind of partially assembled. So before I assemble the base, the undercarriage to the top, I had to figure out a way to kind of make the base sit still. Well, it's not that still, but the main thing I need to do is be able to figure out how to hammer downward pretty good and hard without kind of busting anything. So I have 2 sawhorses here, kind of in between the chair here, and I've clamped the base to the sawhorses again, so I can kind of hammer down pretty hard when I go to put this undercarriage on the chair. Okay, moment of truth here. All right, she's back together. Looking good, so you can see the repairs under there. And it's all holding together. For the seat, where the wood is pretty light, I mixed up kind of just a little tiny batch of shellac where I could kind of test putting ink in, putting dye in a little bit more at a time, and just kind of testing it on a piece of wood just to see the different darkness. So I'm going to use this like a little bit darker mixture to kind of start to blend this seat and make it look you know, less drastic between the worn parts, the fixed parts, and kind of these parts. One very tiny repair I'm going to make is this little notch here I had to create in order to get that pin out. So now I'm going to take a small piece of wood and fill it in there, and then I'll kind of dye the wood once the glue dries. So I'm going to also use some hide glue, because hide glue is brown, which will also kind of help make sure if there's any glue that's visible, it kind of actually blends in with the rest of the chair. Okay, that should be good. Cleaned up the wooden insert there and put a little dye on it, so you can hardly tell there was ever a boo-boo. The last step is putting on a little bit of this shellac just to get things cleaned up. So just a couple components and we should be back in business. If you enjoyed that, go ahead and like the video and subscribe.